G'day, superstars. It's Peps. It's Lace Out, and I'm here with the Round 5 AFL, the Gather Round Review. And what a brilliant weekend of AFL football it was in the great state of South Australia. Thank you, everybody, joining me live on the stream, joining me live on the podcast, listening to this whilst you're either on the train, whether you're on the plane, whether you're going to work or just lazing about. We're bringing you the footy just how you want it, lace out style. For those who don't know me, I'm your host, Christopher Pepper, the 370-game superstar of the East Keilor Football Club, and more importantly, a massive Melbourne supporter, member, but I love the great game of AFL football. We've been going for 6 years. It is arguably the best non-club affiliated podcast, and we're great to have you joining us for this epic episode. It's going to be a big one. We're going to have all the usual suspects are out. We're going to spin the magnets. We're going to go over the weekend wrap. We're going to be going around the grounds. Listener question is also going to be there. We're going to have a look at 1 week at a time. We're also going to check out the scoreboard, go through all the games over a huge weekend of South Australian football. Going to be plenty of questions coming in on the chat tonight. I've got Lee Ali joining me after a massive congratulations to him for kicking 3 goals in his great game on the weekend. So the St. Albans boys had their first week in the EDFL, which is my local league, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. So it's great to have him on board. But like I said, it was Gather Round. It was a first for the AFL, all 9 games in the one state, and we'd have to say it went off without a hitch. Bucket loads of people attending, many from outside the country, and it's going to be there for another 3 years. So it is an exciting prospect. I think it went pretty well. The AFL are loving it, but there's only one little tweak that I'd like to see made, which came around the crowds. But we'll get into all that a little bit later on. All right, as we do, always starting off this massive, massive episode, we're going to go and check out the ladder for round 5 of the AFL ladder and have a look at the top of the food chain. We've got 3 Victorian teams sitting at the top, only split by percentage. We've got the St Kilda Football Club, heartbreaking loss to the Collingwood Football Club on the weekend. They're sitting on 16 on 144.1. Top of the ladder, they've been there for a few weeks, and the way that they played on the weekend, they are going to be up there for a lot longer as well. Essendon, great win over the Melbourne Football Club. Probably a surprise result of the weekend. If you're a Melbourne supporter, it wasn't that surprising. They're sitting on 16 points, 128. Collingwood on 16 on 120. And then you've got a bit of a cluster of teams. Carlton, they're going backwards in a bit of a hurry. Has the demolition of the first 4 rounds started to fall apart? I think it may have. They're sitting on 14 points. Then you've got 5 teams on 12. Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide and the Brisbane Lions make up top 8, just sitting outside on percentage, but it is a fair whacker percentage. The Port Adelaide Football Club. We've then got the Cats, Fremantle, GWS, North Melbourne, Western Bulldogs all on 8 points, Richmond on 6, and then we've got our bottom 4, Gold Coast Suns, West Coast Eagles and Hawthorn. You'd probably say 2 of those 3 teams have been absolutely woeful this year, and one of them isn't Hawthorn. All right, so that's the ladder sitting in there. Is it shaping up? I still don't think. This time last year, we were almost locking in the ladder. It was just that much of a split season. But the way it's sort of sitting at the moment, I reckon we are in a pretty good spot when it comes to the AFL ladder. And I reckon everyone down to probably the Bulldogs. Richmond aren't going to make it. Gold Coast, West Coast and Hawthorn aren't going to make it. But because we're so early, there's only 1 game to make it into the 8, and that's as far down as 14th with the Bulldogs. There's still plenty of room in this one for some movement and some groovement. But I will say, I think that 16, 17 and 18, count them out, start preparing for the draft team. So there's the ladder. How do you see it? Leave a note on the chat or leave a note on the Facebook page, because I think St Kilda, Essendon have been the big surprise packets so far this season. All right. All right, it's time to spin some magnets, everybody. The part of the episode that everybody loves. So it's time to go and spin some magnets. I'm going to start with the good stuff first, because we want to we want to highlight what a great weekend of football it was. And just to do so, we've just got to hand out
3 votes.
All right, let's give out some 3 votes. First and foremost, I spoke about it. Gather round. What a success. 220,000 people attended, and 60,000 of those tickets were purchased outside of South Australia. Massive success. I knew quite a number of people who went over. They absolutely loved it. Adelaide was rocking, footy was rocking, and it's there for 3 more years. A great decision. I was having a chat to my old man, Big Trev, and thinking about, well, was it the right place? Could they move it to a different city every couple of years? And come to think of it, I think Adelaide is the ripe spot for it because it gives everybody from Perth the ability to either take a short flight or drive down if they want to. Gives Melbourne people the opportunity to fly across or only drive 8 hours to get there. It's not a bad trip for people from Sydney. Tassie people can make it. People from the Northern Territory can drive down if they want to take a couple of days trip. But it is a flight for the Brisbane people. But, you know, Brisbane at this stage isn't a massive football state. We know that it's growing. So it is probably the central hub for everybody to get down there. And they did a brilliant job, the AFL. So kudos to you, everybody there at the AFL. You are absolutely brilliant. And I have nothing but a round of... So congratulations. Awesome effort. All right. Collingwood and St Kilda, the best 2 teams in the comp, and they showed why. What a belter of a game. It was just one of those games that it was just a frenetic contest. J-Dog and I, for years, were speaking about, do you want a shootout or do you want a grind? And I think for the type of game that it was, the grind was brilliant to see, but goals were a pinnacle. You needed to kick them. And once again, when they're so short on getting big scores through the big sticks, it was just 2 teams fighting it back and forth. It was really interesting to watch. I'll get into it a lot more when we have a look at the games themselves. We'll get into the stats, but for those 2 teams, they are the 2 best teams in the league right now, and bar none, cannot fault them. But it's going to take a lot to beat St Kilda, I'll be honest, this year. St Kilda, if they keep doing what they're doing, they are a massive chance for it as well. So good luck to those 2 teams. And you know what? Local footy was back. A lot of the Metro Leagues kicked off this weekend, and it was great to see old faces. I went down to the old stomping ground in East Keilor to watch them take on Greenvale. It was a 4-point result to the Cougars, but it was so good to see so many faces. So good to see local footy back as well. The pies were flowing, so were the beers, so was the banter on the fence. You couldn't ask for anything more. It's local footy, it's how we like it, and it's where the future superstars are born and bred. So get around and support your local teams. If it's country footy, if it's metro footy, whatever state you're in, get around. It is a great way to spend the day, and it's a great way to take your mates and have a great time as well too. So it's good to see local footy back as well. All right, let's get into, unfortunately, the drags. And you know who that means? That means we're getting Big Ron to have a bit of a chat to us all.
Haley off, Ellingworth on. Bloody weak as piss.
All right. One thing, I don't know if a lot of you have noticed this, but one thing I'm really concerned about is just the number of cases going straight to the AFL tribunal. We've got another 3 this week, and I can't see it stopping soon. And a lot of it has to do with the tackling. And because the grading categories that Michael Christensen has to work within, there is a bit of grey with a lot of these decisions. Were the arms pinned? Were they not pinned? I know they had hit the ground, but there was no concussion. So was it a football act or could it be avoided? And it's starting to become a common occurrence, and I don't actually like it. I remember the days when I was younger, and it was great. Tuesday nights, you'd listen to the TV or you listen to the radio to see what the tribunal results would be. But they would be for striking cases or tripping or attempted strikes. It's something that was actually worth going to the tribunal for. But clubs are taking the mickey at the moment by just going to the tribunal, challenging one week tackles, which you know that they're not going to get off from. And it's wasting the club's time. It's wasting the tribunal's time. It's a waste of money. And I don't see it unless there is something that is fundamentally wrong with what the action is. I can't see why. Now, I know that the texts are coming through thick and fast as I've brought this up. Big Buzz has said that, Christensen is a bit of a clown. He's got interest in thoroughbred, shouldn't be doing his job. Well, look, you know what? He is doing his job, but the thing is, Buzz, you've got to look at it. He's only got the criteria that he can work within. He can't go ahead and make a call and say, it's this. He's got to say, was it high based on these criteria? Was it reckless based on this criteria? Was it deliberate based on this criteria? He has to, basically follow a flow chart to determine what the result's going to be. And so he's stuck in a hard place. It was designed to make the opportunities of going to the tribunal a lot less, and so clubs would be able to agree on these situations. But no, it's gone the complete other way, and clubs are almost taking advantage of it. Buzz is saying he's a bit of a puppet. He's probably right. Each to their own. I wouldn't want to be wanting to do the job. I reckon if we said to Buzz, go and be a tribunal case MRO person for the week, what type of response would we get? It would be pretty interesting. I know no St Kilda supporters would be rubbed out at all. And I reckon that Essendon and Melbourne and Carlton and Collingwood each would be given at least 6 to 10 weeks if Buzz was doing the job, because he does like the Saints. We know that. All right. Hey, I'm going to throw my team in there, Melbourne. Arguably the worst performance since the 2018 preliminary final, where they didn't kick a goal before half-time against the West Coast Eagles. Now, I want to take nothing away from Essendon, but the D's were absolutely woeful. They were shocking, didn't turn up for the contest. In a game that they should have got the 4 points for and had a percentage boost, Essendon came out and turned the tables on them. They were brilliant. They were sensational. And I'll tell you what, Melbourne have lost, out of their last 19 games, they've lost 10. So they haven't been great for, close to half a season, both sides. So it's going to be interesting that since they went 10-0, they've had a lull. Where do they fit? Are they still the premiership chance that we think that they should be? I'm not sure at this stage, and I'm a mad Melbourne man, as you know. So I'm not too comfortable with what I'm seeing and the way they're performing. I know they had a lot of players out, but every club has players out. And I'll tell you what, if you put Melbourne's top 6 against Essendon's top 6, Melbourne would beat it any day of the week. But I'll tell you what, champion team will beat a team of champions every day, and Essendon were absolutely sensational. All right. Last thing I want to pull out, I spoke about Gather Round and what the brilliant success that it was. But one thing caught my eye, and it caught a lot of supporters' eye, and funny enough, it had to do with this game, which was the Melbourne-Essendon game, which was earlier in the day. One thing what happened was that if you had a look at the game, the AFL said that every game was a sellout. But I don't know if you looked at the crowds. The only thing that was missing besides the tarps for the Port Adelaide game, which would have been brilliant if they did that, that would have really been a gather round. But there were a lot of empty seats during the Melbourne-Essendon game, and it simply came down to because one ticket would get you into both games. And so a lot of the Port Adelaide supporters, they said that they couldn't turn up to the game because it started later. I could understand. Maybe their parole didn't start until 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and so they weren't allowed to leave house arrest until then. That might have been the reason. But I also think that having Port Adelaide at the later game, they just didn't turn up, and that's why there were a lot of seats left open. How does the AFL fix this? Do they kick everybody out, leave a 2-hour gap, and then bring everybody in? You think that would be the better option? I still don't think you should be going around saying that it's a complete sellout when it was obvious that it wasn't a complete sellout for that game. It was for those 2 games combined, the tickets. Hey, the game was pumping in that evening between Port Adelaide and the Doggies. It was absolutely rocking. But, AFL, we're not idiots. We saw that seats were empty. It wasn't a sellout. So, a bit of massaging with the stats in relation to that one. So there's the magnets. They've been spun. The votes went out. Someone got dragged, but someone who didn't get dragged this week was the Adelaide defender Max Michelini, who's been rewarded for a fine start to his AFL career with the AFL Rising Star nomination for round 5. Now, the Crow was taken with pick 17 in last year's draft as a father-son selection and is impressed early in 2023 and was again a strong contributor in their thrashing by 56 points of Carlton. How good was that? He had 10 disposals, 4 tackles, 4 intercept possessions in the victory over the Blues. He's averaging 11.6 disposals, 3.6 marks, 3.4 tackles in his 5 AFL games so far. He has been brilliant for an Adelaide team that is firing. So congratulations to you, man. Max Michelini, the round 5 AFL Rising Star nominee. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, all the way from Bali, the great man, Jamie the J-Dog Wallis, has joined us on the chat. He's loving his mid-season trip after 5 weeks. He's relaxing, he's refreshing himself, rejuvenating himself. It's great to see him on the chat. And he reckons just use Alberton next year. That would be a problem solved. If Alberton hasn't been stolen by this time next year, it could be. All right. But listen, gather around. It's going to be a massive event in 2024. And we might have to have a lace-out road trip over to the game next year as well too. All right. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, last week I brought in a brand new episode. I said what we're going to do is we're going to follow one young man's journey to the draft. We're calling it Draft Watch, and we're getting behind a young man by the name of Jacob Grant. He's playing his first season at the Sandringham Dragons. He's played 3 games so far, and I want to tell you, he had an absolute blinder. He had a 96-62 win over the Greater Western Victoria Rebels. And the Big J man, he came out and kicked another 3. So that's another 3 bags, another 3 snags. Can't ask for much more, this young kid. I reckon he is going to go in the draft. We have got our fingers crossed. We are getting behind Jacob Grant. He's kicking snags, the little bags, and now the coach talent lead is going into a 4-week break. So we won't have updates over the next 4 weeks, but he's going to go play some senior footy at his local club. So we'll have some updates as it goes. So get behind him. Look him up. Look up his highlights. Jacob Grant from the Sandringham Dragons. Lace out is draft watching you. Okay. Time to go around the grounds, ladies and gentlemen. Now, just out of how can I say? Looking back over the many, many years that I did with this great man, I just want to play the Around the Grounds theme song just to celebrate the newsworthiness that Jamie the J-Dog Wallis brought whilst he was with us at Lace Out.
It's time for Around the Ground.
Time for Around the Grounds. We don't say Jamie Wallis anymore. It's with me, CJP. Christopher James Pepper will take you through the Around the Grounds and 2 big stories that have come out over the last couple of days. I just want to touch on them because I think they're quite big. One, dealing with one of the greatest players ever to strap on a pair of Adidas Cooper Mundells. Gary Ablett Sr. is going to be taking legal action against the AFL, Hawthorn and Geelong over his concussion battles. So Gary Ablett Sr. has filed a lawsuit against the AFL and former clubs Geelong and Hawthorn over physical trauma caused by concussion during his career. Now, Ablett Sr. played 248 games, booting 1,031 total goals, become the 6th highest goal scorer in the league history and one of the best ever to play. But unfortunately, as the 61-year-old's lawyer, Michael Margalit claims, those games came at a cost of physical and mental well-being. Allegedly, he's unable to work due to his condition. He's seeking damages, interest, and costs from his former clubs and the league, and has also claimed that he is unable to fund his medical treatment. Now, if you add this to the other 2 class actions that were announced at the end of 2022 and the start of 2023, I can only see this being the tip of the iceberg. For anybody who knows anybody who's had a concussion, I've had a couple of them. They aren't great. I know that the AFL and the clubs are looking into it a hell of a lot more. The safety behind it is a lot more. You know, if we go back, 15 minutes ago when we were talking about the tribunal and the tackle, any instance of the head hitting the ground is almost going for a head assessment, 20 minutes off the ground and these sort of things as well too. But I also take a step back as well. And when you play football, you know what you're getting yourself into and you know what the type of game it is. And it is a physical game and these things are going to happen. Head knocks are a common occurrence. The thing that I do think about for these people is if you go back to the 80s, I grabbed a videotape, Seven's Magic Moments. I don't know if you remember this. And it was all about the great moments in the AFL, big marks, great goals, comedy on the ground, but it also had big hits as well too. There was Biff's Bumps and Brawlers, which was a video cassette that you could purchase at Brash's, already good video store, which celebrated high punches, high hits, knockouts along the ground. The AFL celebrated it and made money off these type of incidents. So I think they have a bit of a case, because if they were really concerned about it, like they are now, they wouldn't have promoted that. But they wanted to promote the hardness of the game, the interest of the game, how tough our players were. And so I think that what Ablett is saying here is, yes, I didn't go out deliberately to get my head smashed in. It did happen. But you also made money off it by promoting the game as what it was. You only need to go back and look at the AFL lads broadcast over to the US. I'd like to see that. Hey, I got footballers that like to take speckies and knock each other out. I'd like to see that. And then they'd show the footage of it. So I think that the AFL players definitely have something. Gary Ablett, one of the greatest to ever play. And we know that there's challenges that he's had, but I'd be interested to hear what the listeners have to say. So jump on the Facebook page, leave a comment on the bottom of this, on the bottom of the podcast post, letting us know, hey, where do you sit with the concussions and the lawsuits and so forth? Are you on the AFL side? Are you on the players' side? Do you sort of sit in the middle? I'm definitely with the players when it comes to this. But I think for the last probably 20 odd years, I would say they've become a lot better with the concussion side of things. Thus the removal of the bump, thus with the sling tackles, etc. But yeah, it is definitely going to be a challenging one for all. All right. The other big story is by the name of Kylie Watson-Wheeler. Now, many people who are listening to this right now are going, Peps, who is Kylie Watson-Wheeler? Is she the number one draft pick in the AFLW? Is she a new coach of one of the AFLW teams? Is she another person on the AFL commission? Well, Kylie Watson-Wheeler is the Western Bulldogs president and the senior vice president and managing director of the Walt Disney Company in Australia and New Zealand. Kylie Watson-Wheeler has now surged into genuine contention alongside Executive General Manager of Football Operations, Legal and Integrity, Andrew Dillon, to become the next AFL boss. Now, the other three candidates we know are Brendan Gale, as well as AFL executives Travis Auld and Kylie Rogers as well too. So only 13 people have had the role since its inception. When I was doing a bit of research, I was quite surprised by that. When it was called a VFL president since 1897. So for a game that's been going since 1897, we've only had 13 people in this role, the president CEO role. All 13 of them have been white men with an average age of 49 years beginning on the role. Look, in my eyes, I don't really care who does the job, as long as they're the best person for the role. Now, the AFL, practicality and common sense, in my eyes, over politics will be the winner, and it will be a momentous decision for the CEO and who is going to be number 15. Do you reckon, I don't know much about Kylie Watson-Wheeler, but from what I've read, she is an absolute bumper. She may not know the nous around the football side of things, but in terms of a CEO leading a business, maybe it's the option that we need. Maybe we need to get somebody with a fresh set of eyes to look at it from a business strategic perspective and not what is in the best interest for their mates. Because I'm telling you now, McLaughlin, Demetrio, especially those two in the last couple of reigns, have definitely had their best mates involved, best mates' interests involved. And you only have to go back and have a look at the Boys Club book written by Michael Warner to understand that, yes, they put the game forward, but I think they also put the AFL as a competition forward, and maybe not in the best way possible. So Kylie Watson-Wheeler, Brendan Gale, Travis Auld, Kylie Rogers, I think anybody will do a great job, but it'd be awesome to see the magnificent Kylie or what's his name, Andrew Dillon, become the next CEO. I don't know where it's going to sit though. I don't know whether the AFL are willing to make the big call. I don't know. What do you reckon, listeners? Viewers on the chat right now, what do you reckon? I'm not too sure. Buzzer's written that Gary Ablett Sr. concussed plenty of players, so not sure how he's claiming concussion. You only have to talk to Gary Ablett. You don't have to talk to Gary Lyon, and he'll tell you about the day that he got absolutely cleaned up by Gary Ablett one day. So, yeah, I do reckon, Buzz, you've got something on that one as well too. All right. So Gary Ablett Sr., Kylie Watson-Wheeler, they are the two main topics to come out of Around the Grounds this weekend. All right. Andy Bridges joined up to talk about Essendon's great win. I'm going to get into the games in a moment. He reckons that Zach Merritt was stiff. Unfortunately, I don't think he is. We just know now that if you pin an arm and the guy's head hits the ground, regardless of the outcome, it's all about the action, you're going to get a week. And that's pertinent through all the different outcomes that are going to come out from last week and this week as well too. All right. Let's have a look at the games. I want to have a bit of a chat about this because we had some cracking football, and we've got to rewind. He had one arm free, but the other arm wasn't. Yeah, he had one arm pinned. Simple as that. His head hit the ground. You can't argue with it. Don't fight City Hall, Andy. Don't fight City Hall. You won't have a chance. Doesn't matter. Rightio. Adelaide, what a cracking win over Carlton. They absolutely destroyed them on that Thursday night. The issue is that Carlton, what is going on with Carlton? They started the year on such a high and they've gone completely backwards again. But I'll tell you what, are they the fittest club in the AFL right now? Are they? Adelaide is sensational. Absolutely sensational. Their forward line was firing. Can't fault them whatsoever. And they beat Carlton at their own. Carlton looked pedestrian. You got Fogarty kicking 5, Walker kicking 5, Keys kick 5. It was just awesome. Absolutely awesome to see what they did. Rankin did his best again. Dawson coming in from Geelong has been absolutely sensational. I was just saying that it's going berserk on the chat right now as I started to get into games, and I'll get into it in a moment. But Dawson has been absolutely brilliant. He could actually be top 2 behind Dacos for the Brownlow at the moment. If you had money at the start of the year on Dawson to be actually even close to pulling a vote, let alone leading it, you would have been write your own ticket stuff as well too. But Carlton, same names, Chera, Walsh, Curnow, Wiedering. Ed Curnow was the best rated player on the ground for this particular game. You can't fault them. They're the hardest running team. Their fitness coach is Darren Burgess, and every team that he's gone through, whether it was Port Adelaide, over to the D's in their premiership seasons and over to Port Adelaide, every team is fit and they run on the ground harder, longer and faster than every other team out there. But if you just have a look at some of the stats across the board, they smashed them by 70 in disposals. The inside 50 count, funny enough, Carlton had more, but their efficiency was 5% less. Their inside 50 efficiency was 25% less. So they got it in there and absolutely butchers it. Adelaide went in, sliced and diced, did everything else. They smashed them at the stoppages. Their clearance work, Carlton got their hands on the ball a lot more, but Adelaide out of the centre were absolutely sensational. And that's where they generated a lot of their goals as well too. So Adelaide, are they a smoky for the flag? Why not? I reckon they're a massive chance for it. They've got the best forward line in the league. And if they continue doing what they did on the weekend, they've got a really good draw because obviously they finished a lot lower than, top 8 teams. They've got a really good draw and they could make the most of it. And I won't say pinch a flag, but definitely could work their way up and pinch a top 4 spot. And once you're in that top 4, you really got a massive chance of only having to win 3 games to hold up that big, beautiful Silver Cup. Carlton, same old story, isn't it? They did this same time last year. They started the house on fire last year, comes into weeks 4 and 5, and they've gone pedestrian again. Do we get enough out of Michael Voss supporters? Do you reckon? Do you reckon he says enough at press conferences? Or does he pretty much repeat the same sort of thing? I don't know. What do you think, Carlton supporters? Would you be happy with the way your team's going at the moment compared to how they start to how they are at the moment? Are you getting enough out of Chera? I know you've got your injury concerns, but what team doesn't? It's going to be a massive week this week, Anzac round, when we move in very, very shortly to have a look, because they've got a massive matchup this weekend. They're playing St Kilda, 3:20 at Marvel Stadium. If they lose this one, they're out of the 8, and it's going to make it a lot harder to catch up. And that belief that a lot of Carlton supporters and people like myself had at the start of the year will start to fade, and questions will once again be asked. And at the moment, which is hard to believe, they are going in as favourites based on the bookies as well too. So I can't believe that. I think St Kilda will absolutely demolish them. All right. The early game on Friday, which was the Fremantle Dockers versus the Gold Coast Suns. It was a really nice game to watch. I really enjoyed it. Sat back and watched it. It was up and down. It was Fremantle got off to a great start. At halftime, it looked like the Gold Coast Suns were going to run away with it. Third quarter comes along. Freo kick another 5. Goes into the last, and it just was simply down to 10 points. Gold Coast, I think, should have won this. That they played, I believe, the better football, but Fremantle just had to do it where it was done. If you have a look at the goals, it was 15-10 to 13-12. So goal kicking was pretty much on par. They both had 25 shots at goal, but it was just the beautiful Fremantle Dockers. Michael Walters had an absolute blinder. He had kicked another 4 back to his old self. And when the game was in a bit of a stasis, he came in and set the world on fire. It was absolutely brilliant down forward. Caleb Sarong, don't worry about Andrew Brayshaw. He is their best midfielder, bar none. Absolutely cracking game, 37. He's averaging 32 for the year as well too. Jack Lukosius, he was everywhere in that first half. He was the only one really keeping Gold Coast in the game. Matt Rowell, once again, 11 tackles. Like, he's an absolute bull. He's getting back to that type of play that we saw him when he got those massive amount of votes in his first couple of games in the AFL. And Caleb Sarong, once again, also smashed it from the contested possessions perspective as well. Disposals-wise, Fremantle did it by 50. Inside 50s was pretty close as well too, 48 to 45. Fremantle won the clearances. Fremantle won the disposal efficiency. They won the possession count as well too. Tackle count was by the Suns, but when you haven't got the ball, you're trying to get it back, so that doesn't surprise me whatsoever. And from a hit-outs perspective, Darcy was absolutely sensational, 58 to 24 in the ruck as well too. So Gold Coast, they'll rue letting this one go. They led the contested possessions. They were getting their hands on the ball at the stoppage, but they weren't able to do anything forward, and Fremantle were just so much more efficient. Luke Jackson was a hell of a lot better this week as well too, so he's starting to find a little bit of rhythm with the Fremantle side of things. So I think Fremantle got away with one here, but it now starts to raise questions about Stewie Dew. I've been a massive advocate of him. I've loved everything that he's bought, but I think he's heading into his 5th season right now. How much longer can they give him? Really, how much longer? Because they've got a lot of these kids coming up in contract negotiations. If they continually go backwards, well, they won't give him another couple of years. I can't see them doing it. I can't see them waiting another 2-3 years. The AFL have already waited 11 for them to actually do something. They've already gone through McKenna, they've already gone through Eade, and they've already gone through Stewie Dew as well. How much longer are we going to wait for this team to do something? And I don't think the AFL will. If they keep winning, the noose loosens. They keep losing, going to get tighter. And I really think they missed out on a Ross Lyon or a Clarkson. In hindsight, also Scott as well too. Adam Kingsley. So there was an opportunity to make a change, but unfortunately they didn't, and now you have to reap what you sow. And at the moment, they're not sowing much at all on the field. So, look, great win by Fremantle. Gold Coast, I know if Tommy Roker was on the chat right now, he'd be going absolutely ballistic. All right. Hey, Sydney by 44 over the over the Richmond Tigers on Friday night. Another great game. And don't let the 44 points blow you away, because this was actually really tight for quite a portion of it. There was only 21 points in at halftime. Richmond came out in the third quarter, kicked 7, got within 7 points, and then the Tommy Papley show. Now, I don't know if anyone had a chance to watch this game, but Tommy Papley, he lit it alight. In the second half of the game, he not just came out and kicked 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5. He kicked a bags, bags, bags. We love it when they're kicking bags, bags, bags. It's got to be 6 or more. So he came out and kicked 6 snags against a formidable Richmond, and he basically got them across the line. So Tommy Papley, I was having a chat to one of my mates who's a Sydney supporter, and we agreed on this. Everybody hates him. you play against Sydney, you can't stand this bloke. I can't stand this bloke. God, I'd love to have him sitting around my forward line because you know you're going to have someone who just brings it to the contest every single week. So it was a great game. Like I said, Tommy Papley was sensational. Richmond, they can hold their heads up high for 3 quarters, especially coming in the back half. Rewald kicked 4, Cumberland kicked 2, Papley kicked 6, Heaney kicked 2, Armady kicked 2, but unfortunately went and did his hamstring just as Buddy was out, just as he thought he was going to be slotting himself in for another good run of games, goes and does a hamstring. Baker was Richmond's best as well as Rewald. Hopper did all right, so does Prestia. Hapley, Blakey, Warner, Lloyd, Gilden and Heaney were the best as well too. So this really sets up Sydney in a really good position. They had a great win the week before. They come in this week, they take another one out, and obviously they're starting to really set their season up nicely. Go back to Sydney, play this week. It's going to be a challenging game, and I'll get into that very, very shortly. But Richmond, they were a few men down. They had no Lynch. They had no Nankervis. They can hold their head up high. But once again, they've got more injuries going into this week against the D's on Anzac Eve. So it is going to be a new one. So, yeah, David Salt reckons he's going to be the new Acker. I don't think he's going to be the new Acker because he doesn't do handstands and bleach his hair. But he has got some spunk about him, and I would love to have him at my club. All right. We hit on the Sydney Super Saturday. I'm not going to spend too much time about this game, but when you've got a team that has 42 scoring shots to 17, no wonder why they won by 75 points. It was the Brisbane Lions over the North Melbourne Football Club. North Melbourne reminded me of what they've been doing for the last couple of years with that performance on the weekend. Clarkson would absolutely be ropeable with it. And that's the type of football that Brisbane can play. I think what surprised us all, though, was Brisbane played that game outside of Brisbane. And I think that's where a lot of us were surprised what they could do. It was a formidable, once again, another formidable performance by the Lions. Got to have a look at this great guy. Mr. Danaher came out and kicked 5. He was one off bags. That would have been great to have Danaher in there as well too. But he came out, shone. I reckon his form over the last few weeks has been pretty good. And it was really good to see him come out and get rewarded for his efforts. But they just did what they had to do, and that was go out and absolutely destroy them. Ashcroft versus Sheasel, the two young guns going at it as well too. Sheasel finished with 31. Ashcroft finished with 23. Listen, Sheasel will take out the rising star, I reckon, this year. He's been nothing short of sensational. I don't know many first-year players that have had 30-plus in his first 5 games of AFL football. I don't think there'll be many of them. If you have a look once again from the scoring perspective, it was Danaher and Hipwood, Brisbane's Twin Towers. Excuse me. Excuse me about that. Brisbane's Twin Towers kicking at 9 between them. Cameron had 4. Rayner had 2. Stevenson kicked 4, which was a nice little return for him as well too. Compton had 2 as well too. It was the usual brigade. Neil, Zorko, Dunkley, the midfielders, just giving them ample ball down forward. Andrews did a great job on Larkey and also Starcevic on Zerha. Stopped them completely. It was the young guys of Sheasel, Howe, Comden, Stevenson and Powell who did it for North Melbourne. Brisbane, that's the win that they needed. They've had a couple of disappointing ones. They've had some great wins over the last couple of weeks as well too. They've had a great one against North. They had a great one against Melbourne a couple of weeks ago. They had that disappointing one against the Doggies. So they're just setting themselves up nicely, and they're the games that they should be winning on a more regular basis outside of the state of Queensland. All right, here we go. This is going to get a few people excited. It was the Essendon Football Club by 27 points against the Melbourne Football Club. Really disappointing. I even said earlier on for the people who didn't join us, it was a woeful performance by Melbourne. Absolutely gut-wrenching. This is a game, I'll be honest, every Melbourne supporter thought we would win, but every game that Melbourne supporters thought that we would lose as well too, because this is the type of game that Melbourne would lose. Everything was there for them to win it. But I will say something. Essendon were absolutely brutal in the way that they played against the D's. It was early. It was close going early, all right? But they just put the nose to the grindstone and they ground out a win. It's not often that Melbourne get absolutely destroyed when it comes to contested ball, contested possessions, tackles, etc. Essendon, across the board, annihilated Melbourne. Inside 50s. 57 to 55. It doesn't say much, but the efficiency was higher as well too. Your inside 50 efficiency, you're 11% better. So yes, your ball went in, but you made much more scoring out of it as well too. Hit-outs, dominated the hit-outs. Grundy had to go against Draper and Phillips in the ruck, made it really, really difficult, and they did an awesome job. Then they dropped down forward and made it really hard for our defenders to do that as well too. So hit-outs absolutely smashed us. Melbourne did win the clearances, but did absolutely nothing with them. They won the centre clearances, but did absolutely nothing with them. They did the stoppage clearances, they did absolutely nothing with them. But when it came to the contested possessions, Essendon did what Essendon have done so far this year, and they've been a lot more brutal around the ball, which is something that Essendon supporters, and I know there's Essendon supporters on the chat right now who have to agree that that was the best that they've played in a hell of a long time. They made them turnovers. They were in possession for more of the match. They were in possession for a majority of the game. And if it wasn't for the last 10 minutes where Melbourne got some junk time, the game would have been wrapped up a lot earlier. Zach Merritt is absolutely loving being the captain of this team. He is being absolutely sensational. He would have got the 3 Brownlow votes. Darcy Parish was magnificent again. I wouldn't say a career revival. He's been good over the last couple of seasons, but he's really taking a step up. Interesting that he hasn't signed just yet. So I'm be keen to find out from Essendon supporters what's going on there. Draper kicked 3, Phillips kicked 2, Martin Langford kicked 2, Hind kicked 2. But for the Ds, Pickett, Melksham, Fritsch kicked 2. There really wasn't much more than that. Their disposal was lacking. Their intensity was lacking. Their contest was lacking. I think they were just going to think that they were going to turn up and do it. Now, whether the West Coast trip beforehand, 6-day break, and then having to travel again might have made them feel a little bit lethargic, I understand. But I can also understand that you've got to play against the team that goes out there. And if there's one thing about Essendon, regardless of how shit they've been over the years, I think that they'd be very, very happy with what they've seen on the weekend. So it was absolutely sensational. Perrott, Merritt, Draper, McGrath, Shield, Durham, and Langford. Awesome stuff. So well done to the Essendon Football Club. A great win. Now, does it set their season up? Well, they are sitting pretty high on the ladder at the moment. I think they're sitting third, which is great. Will it last all season? Hey, Essendon supporters can only dream. But that's a type of win that starts to give you some hope. And I remember I've told you many times, hope stands for hold on, pain ends. And maybe the PE will be coming a lot sooner than later. Melbourne played Richmond this Anzac Eve. And I'm sorry, you're second. You're second. Jeez, crikey, it's like they've won a final. It wasn't all coming true, but that we'll get that final one day, Andy. You got to get there first, and then you might win one. All right. Melbourne play Richmond this week, so that's going to be one that they have to win, because if they don't, questions are really going to start being asked about the Ds in the red and the blue. All right. Hey, another cracking game. Port Adelaide, what a win over the Doggies, 14 points in a sold out, because no one turned up to the early game, Adelaide Oval to round out the Saturday of Gather Round. Port Adelaide, magnificent. It was up and down. The Doggies got in front by just on with about half a quarter to go, got in front, but then it was Port Adelaide kicking the last, 4 goals of the game to win it. Cody Waitman had his 4 goals, which was a great return, took an absolute blinder. From a disposals perspective, it was Treloar out there. Tim O'Brien did everything around the ground from a match leader's perspective as well. But the interesting thing, though, is that Port Adelaide, by Mr. Alex Barnes himself, you know who I'm talking about, Jason Horne-Francis, absolutely tore it a new one in that last quarter. Absolutely tore them a new one. And I think that's a Jason Horne-Francis that we've been wanting to see. Socks pulled up, wet hair, hard football, and he showed why he was the number 1 draft pick. His last quarter was absolutely brilliant. Alir down back, he has been already an All-Australian once when it comes to AFL football, and he is looking to becoming an All-Australian again. He was magnificent, took out Aaron Norton on Saturday night, and it was absolutely sensational. Marshall kicked 2, Burne-Jones kicked 2, Waitman kicked 4, Norton, Hannon, English and Bontempelli were the scorers for the Dogs. We spoke about Butters, Rosie, the 2 young guns absolutely destroying it for Port Adelaide. Wines was in there. We spoke about Horne-Francis. And isn't it interesting? When you look at the Doggies, Waitman kicks his 4, obviously being in the best. The Bont's probably one of the best captains in the league, bar none. English is the number 1 rated player in the league right now, which might surprise a few people looking at midfielders, etc. But when you look at everything and you complement all the bits and pieces, he is the number 1 player in the league. Sensational. Liberatore in the absolute muck tore it up as well. So Port Adelaide, 2 wins in a row, something that they needed going into, obviously, the Anzac Day weekend. The Doggies, they're going to rue another one that slipped by. And now the question needs to be asked, where do the Doggies sit? Are they in a bit of a lull? Like, it's only 5 rounds, and we've got many, many more to get towards the end of the season. But the questions have to start. You make your final spot early in the season, and at the moment, they're not taking their opportunities and running away with them. Very similar to Melbourne, very similar to Geelong earlier on in the season. But I think Geelong is starting to get some rhythm back. The Doggies are very hit and miss. So Port Adelaide would be wrapped with what they've done over the last couple of weeks. Doggies would be lamenting what they've rolled out this week after the great win against Brisbane the week before. So stay tuned for the Western Bulldogs, because at the moment, if I was a stockbroker, and I know they do this on other stations, but they would be a hold for me because I'm not too sure what I expect out of them. All right, we had Super Sunday. It was the Geelong Football Club against the West Coast Eagles, Geelong by 47. But I think the big thing to come out of this was the match timeline. So at quarter time, you're thinking, it's 5 goals 3, 33 to 2 goals 3. Oh, this is going to be a close one. Geelong went, stuff you. Came out and kicked just a casual 9 goals 2 to 1 goal 4 and blew the game apart. Jeremy Cameron, what more can you say about this bloke? Like, he's the best player in the league, but I don't care what you say about Nick Dacos. Anyone can rack up possessions, but put him through the big sticks as regularly as that guy does is, everyone would love to have a Jeremy Cameron on their side. And God damn, am I jealous of the Richmond Football Club as well too. To West Coast credit, they did outscore Geelong in the second half, 10 goals to 7. So they didn't just go into their shells. It was a little bit similar to the week before against Melbourne, where they actually showed some effort, something that I haven't done for the previous, almost season and a half before that as well too. But Dangerfield delivered. He was sensational. He had 4 inside 50s in the first quarter. Ruben Gimby is another one that we're looking out for. He's got a bright future there with the Cats. Hawkins got on the league board, which is sensational. Finally got some goals behind him. But yeah, it was Geelong did what they had to do. Hawkins kicked 4, Brad Close kicked 4, which is great to see a long sleeve player doing it. Charlie Cameron kicked 4, Henry kicked 2. And for West Coast, Waterman and Allen kicking 8 between them. Darling was there as well. I don't know. English, no, he's not the son of Des English. Des English, unfortunately, passed away, I reckon close to 20-odd years ago, even maybe more. So, no, definitely not the son. Just the same surname there, Davey Salt. But Geelong, they've got a bit of spunk about them back in the last couple of weeks. And West Coast, it's good to see that they're trying the kids. Waterman, Allen and Jones were their best, but Dangerfield, Hawkins and Cameron, Blitzarves, you name it, they got done what they had to do. So kudos to Geelong. They're going to start making their climb up. I wrote them off a couple of weeks ago. I'm still not sold 100% just yet. I know it's early days, but it was West Coast, let's be honest. And West Coast were what West Coast do best, and that's get pumped. All right, 2 games to go. GWS and Hawthorn. Who would have thought that this was the last 2 games of the weekend were almost the 2 best games of the weekend. GWS by 2 points. It went down to the last 2 minutes with this game. It was an absolute blinder, back and forth. Harry Himmelberg goes ahead at the 28-minute mark of the last quarter, puts GWS in front, and then Jarman Impey has a shot at the other end, and who's there to touch it as it goes over the line? Big Harry Himmelberg stops with it as well too. So, GWS, like I said, they've got a couple of wins on the board. They're starting to get a bit of the mojo under their new coach. I think Adam Kingley is a great mix for them. They're showing a lot more passion, a lot more drive than they have over the last couple of seasons as well too. So, interesting to see the way that they've got it. Cadman made his AFL debut, kicked a goal. I think he's going to be, I won't say a star at this age because it's his first game, but I think he's got some spunk about him, and I can see why he went at number 1. And I think he and Hogan are going to make a nice little combo down there for the Giants. The Hawks are defensive. Unfortunately, for the 5th week in a row, they've had 5 straight goals to their name. They've got to be able to stop this because when you get really good teams, they won't be 5, it'll be 6, it'll be 7, it'll be 8, it'll be 9. We saw even Essendon on the weekend kick, I think it was 7 in a row against the D's. Stop them for approximately 57 minutes from them kicking a goal as well too. So when teams get on a roll, it's really hard to stop it. And you can't let anyone get on rolls these days. Toby Green, once again, brilliant, kicking 3. Hogan kicked 2 and Hammelberg kicked 2. Hawthorn had Green kick 3 and Amon kicked 2. Toby Green, in terms of best players, was not Toby, but it was Tom, Cornelio and Taylor. Newcomb, Warple and Impey were the best 4. Yeah, it really came down to the efficiency inside 50. That was probably the ball breaker. 53% to GWS, 45% to Hawthorn. That's really what won it. So congratulations to GWS. Hawthorn rue another one that they've let slip through their fingers, but they'll be obviously better for the run. But one game that didn't slip through our fingers was the last game for this weekend. And I know Buzz would have been buzzing about this one because even though they lost, they went down. This will probably be the game of the year so far. It was hard. It was brutal. It wasn't massive on the scoreline, but when you look at 10 goals 10 to 9 goals 10, you can't really get much closer than that outside of a solitary point. And that's the type of football game that brings people through the door. Collingwood, it was 2 interesting game styles. You've got Richmond, who are around the ball, make the contest sprint back. Collingwood like to have that extra person around the contest to try and feed it out as well too. Also go through the middle. It was back and forth. It was narrow. Collingwood almost got out to a 30-point lead in that last quarter, and then St Kilda came back with a rush. And unfortunately, if they had another 5 minutes of time, they would have taken that one out. When it comes to the overall match report, have a look at the player stat side of things. The only person that you have to look at, and I can't understand this, how does a bloke not get tagged at all? Can someone on the chat, somebody who's listening to this, please, how does no one tag Nick Dacos? He's had another 42. So what have we had? We've had 5 rounds. He would have 4 best on grounds, wouldn't he? Like, no one plays on him. Now, I don't know whether it's too hard to play on him. I don't know whether they think team defense works, but he is their barometer. He is everywhere. And I don't understand why you'd want to let someone get the ball 42 times and then allow them to gain 856 metres with it as well too. It's mind-numbing how nobody has just put an anchor on him. Sydney did it in a final last year and nullified him. Why isn't anyone doing it this year? I don't know. Sometimes you just have to, rob Peter to pay Paul. And some teams I think might want to just, give something up in their own to stop this guy because he needs to be stopped. Absolutely needs to be stopped. But it was a cracking game across the board. Rowan Marshall had a cracking game up there in the ruck as well too. 32 hitouts. Brad Crouch was everywhere with another 33 disposals. Callum Wilkie, slot him in for the All-Australian full back right now. No one has having a better season than him right now. Josh Dacos, Tom Mitchell. I thought when Tom Mitchell went over to Collingwood, it was a mistake. Another reason why I don't know much about footy because what he has delivered so far for the Collingwood Magpies has been brilliant and still side bottom. And I want to throw another one in there, Mason Wood. You would have Wood if you were a St Kilda supporter with what Mason Wood is delivering at the moment. It's his 10th year of AFL football, and I think finally we've been able to see what this guy can do. From a team stats perspective, if you go down and compare across the board, it was literally the same. The interesting one to come out of this, though, was that Collingwood had 14 more inside 50s, but their efficiency was actually less, 35% to 40. So what that was telling me is that, yes, they got it in a hell of a lot, but the back line of the beautiful St Kilda Saints was just able to stop everything and run it out, come back in, run it out, come back in, run it out. So it was a defensive orgasm if you were watching that game. And I'll tell you now, if these two teams serve this type of footy up for the rest of the season, they are going to have some very happy supporters at the end of the year, and this competition is going to be a lot better for it. Hopefully, they open up the scoring a little bit more as well too. I don't think 10 goals to 9 for a caliber of that game is what we want to see. We want to see some defence, but we really want to see some more attacking football as well too. So hopefully that can open up a little bit more towards the finals, but I just have a feeling the way that, especially for Ray, the Ross Lyon would play, he'll kick 4 goals and stop the other ones kicking 3. That's the way it is as well too. Alrighty. From a match report side of things, I just want to really whip through this one. When it comes to it, You've got Hill, Bobby Hill. How good was he in the first quarter? My check as well too. McCreary. McStay's gone down with a finger injury. He's going to be out. So the injury curse at Collingwood is continuing. They've got no ruckman, and now their backup ruckman is going to be struggling as well. Caminiti kick 2, Higgins kick 2. Higgins at the moment is in All-Australian form for that forward pocket as well too. He's having a career best season. Isn't it interesting? Ross Lyon comes in and look at all these players finally being free in the way that they do things. Nick Dacos, Moore and Hill were the best for Collingwood. Wilkie, Crouch and Battle was sensational. So there is the scoreboard for round 5, gather round, and what a belter of a round it was. Tell me what you thought on the chat, everybody. Tell me what you thought on the Facebook page was your gather round match of the week. All right, let's have a look at 1 week at a time and the games that I am looking forward to this week, being round 6 of AFL footy. Now, when it comes to this week's games, we've got an interesting mix. You've got to remember it is also Anzac weekend. So if you can, get yourself an Anzac badge and support the veterans as well, to support the Anzacs. A bucket-load of really good games here for various reasons. Fremantle Western Bulldogs. I think whoever loses that game can count their finals goodbye on Friday night. So that's going to be a belter to start. No Thursday night game for round 6, the first time for quite a while. We've then got a 4:35 Monica Oval, GWS versus Brisbane Lions. So the GWS on a bit of a high after last week. Will Brisbane be able to take what they did last week in Adelaide and bring it over to Monica Oval in the ACT? I don't know. Will Brisbane be able to play 2 games out of Queensland in a row? Any good? We'll find out. Geelong versus Sydney, that speaks for itself. Carlton versus St Kilda. I think this says more about Carlton than St Kilda. If Carlton lose this one, the jungle drums, they will be up-eating. Suns versus North. What happens if the Suns lose to North Melbourne this week? Can you see it happening, listeners? Can you see it happening? I reckon it can. I reckon Clarkson will have them ripe and ready for this week. And then the 2 games to finish it off. Monday, Melbourne versus Richmond. Melbourne need to win this one. Richmond, they need to get their season back on track. So they're going to be a little bit injury deficient. Melbourne are going to be bringing some players in after last week, and they'll be hungry. That's going to be a belter. And then the traditional Anzac game. Have a look at this. Collingwood firing on all cylinders. Essendon still on a Chubbs Farquhar from their start of their season as well too. 3:20 p.m. MCG for the traditional Anzac game. Like I said, there's probably 4 or 5 games you could really get excited about for various reasons across the board. So, listeners, that's it. For everybody who's joined me on the chat, some of the things that have come out, Jules Julio reckons it's going to be a repeat of the 2010s final. I'm going to say it, Jazz. He was fucking embarrassed by what the North Melbourne brought on the weekend, but he reckons that they should beat the Suns on Saturday. I think I missed the Port versus Eagles game. No, I didn't, because Port should win that quite easily. Once again, 1 week of the game is the games I'm looking forward to, not what the supporters are, but I think you'll definitely take that one out as well too. One other thing that someone's mentioned also on the chat is that, did you know that it's interesting that Adelaide have played the last 4 games in Adelaide, starting to get a bit of Richmond treatment about them. See what happens when they will start to come out too. So, hey, another great week. That is our round 5 gather round review. Remember, we're here every Tuesday night, kicking off at 8 p.m. So a couple of people have joined in late, maybe because it's used to daylight savings, maybe because they're on a Twitter sphere. Hey, maybe they were watching The Farmer Wants a Wife. I don't know, but they've joined us. Everybody who joined me live on the chat, absolutely thank you. Absolutely love, because that's what you're here for. Everybody listening to this right now, thank you for joining me on your headphone set or on your smart device or on your transistor, however you're listening to this in the car. Joining me, the host, Chris Pepper, the host of Lace Out, because it's how you want your footy. Good luck to your teams this week. Thank you, listeners. Thanks for listening to the latest episode of Lace Out. Head over to iTunes and Spotify to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. And remember, join us every single Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, on our Facebook page with yours truly, Christopher Pepper,